In the gleaming penthouse of Lagos, Zainab Adeyemi, daughter of one of Africa's most powerful billionaires, has built an empire of her own. Yet at 32, she has rejected every suitor, every gesture of love, every attempt at connection. Her coldness is legendary. Her father's advisors whisper that she is untouchable, unreachable, a woman whose wealth has frozen her heart. For 7 years, a quiet woman named Amara has cleaned her apartment, arranged her flowers, prepared her meals. Zainab barely sees her. She is part of the furniture, invisible, silent, beneath notice. But Amara sees everything. She sees Zainab's trembling hands at midnight. She sees the photographs hidden in a drawer. She sees a woman afraid of something deeper than loneliness. One night, everything changes. A secret is revealed, not Zainab's, but Amara's. And in that moment of truth, the billionaire's daughter discovers that the woman she has ignored for 7 years holds the key to her own redemption. This is the story of how one act of witnessing can shatter walls that money could never break. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here, we tell stories that prove compassion can rise from the most unexpected places. Chapter 1. The Fortress. Zainab stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her penthouse, watching the city of Lagos dissolve into evening. 43 stories below, people moved like insects. Purposeful, desperate, small. She lifted her glass of wine and felt nothing. Her phone buzzed. Another message from her father's director of operations, a man named Chukwu, successful, ambitious, waiting for her answer. She deleted it without reading. Love was a distraction for people without alternatives. Zainab had built an alternative. At 32, she managed a portfolio of tech investments worth over 2 billion naira. She spoke 4 languages. She answered to no one. She needed nothing from anyone. Behind her, the door opened softly. Amara entered carrying fresh linens. The maid was perhaps in her late 30s, with deep brown skin and eyes that seemed to hold too many questions. She moved through the apartment with the practiced invisibility of someone accustomed to being unseen. "Good evening, Ma," Amara whispered, her accent marking her as not from Lagos, perhaps from the north, perhaps from somewhere beyond Nigeria entirely. Zainab did not turn from the window. "I won't be home for dinner." "Yes, Ma." Amara changed the bedding with efficiency. Her movements were quiet, respectful, the movements of someone who understood hierarchy not as theory, but as survival. When she was done, she lingered for just a moment, as if she wanted to say something, then she left. Zainab had never considered Amara's interior life. People like her existed in the margins of Zainab's world. They were necessary. They were compensated. Beyond that, they were blank. Later that night, Zainab lay in her reinforced sanctuary, unable to sleep. She thought of Chukwu. He was kind, she supposed, successful. He wanted to marry her, wanted children, wanted to build something together. He had shown her a photograph of a house he was designing, white stone, terraced gardens, spaces for laughter. She had thrown away the photograph, the thought of being known that completely, of allowing someone inside the fortress she had built. It terrified her in a way she could not articulate. Love required vulnerability. Vulnerability required risk. Risk meant loss. And loss, she had learned long ago, was the only certainty in life. She closed her eyes and heard the rain beginning to fall. In the darkness of her bedroom, surrounded by everything money could buy, Zainab felt profoundly, utterly alone, and she had worked very hard to make sure it stayed that way. Chapter 2. The Invisible Woman. Amara had been in Zainab's employ for 7 years. In that time, she had moved through the penthouse like a ghost, present but not seen, working but not acknowledged, existing in the spaces between moments. She arrived each morning at 6, before Zainab woke. She prepared breakfast that went uneaten. She arranged flowers in vases that Zainab never looked at. She dusted surfaces and aired rooms and made everything perfect, and in all of it Zainab acknowledged her with perhaps a gesture, perhaps a silence. Amara did not resent this. Resentment required energy, and energy was something she rationed carefully. Before Lagos, there had been another life, another city, another name, almost forgotten now. Amara was what she had become, a reshaping of herself into something smaller, quieter, safer. In Zainab's apartment, she had found something precious: invisibility. Here, no one asked questions. Here, she could work and earn and save and slowly, incrementally rebuild something that had been destroyed. She noticed things about Zainab that Zainab did not notice about herself. She noticed the photographs, a woman who looked like an older version of her, a man in a military uniform, a child's drawing preserved in a frame. She noticed that Zainab went through men like others went through tea, with interest, then indifference. She noticed the trembling in Zainab's hands on certain mornings, as if she had survived something in the night. One afternoon, Amara found a journal open on Zainab's desk. She was not supposed to read it. She turned to leave, but one line caught her eye. "If I let anyone in, they will know who I really am, and then they will leave, like everyone does." Amara stood with the journal in her hands, her own breath shallow. She understood that sentence with a clarity that frightened her. She knew exactly what it meant to believe you were too broken to be loved. She replaced the journal and continued her work. But something had shifted. The woman she served was not simply cold or privileged or unreachable. She was afraid, and fear, Amara understood, was not a flaw. It was proof of having survived something. Chapter 3. The Encounter. It happened on a Tuesday in October. Zainab came home early, her head pounding with a migraine. She wanted darkness, silence, solitude. Instead, she found Amara on the balcony, standing motionless, staring at the Lagos skyline. For the first time, Zainab truly looked at her, really looked. And in that moment she saw something that startled her. Amara's shoulders were shaking. Barely perceptibly, but unmistakably, she was crying. "What's wrong?" The question surprised them both. Amara turned quickly, wiping her face. "Nothing, Ma. I'm sorry. I should not." "I asked you a question." Amara's eyes filled again and she looked away. "My daughter. Today her school called. She is ill. Fever, and I am here and she is with my mother and I cannot." She stopped, collecting herself. "I apologize, Ma. It is not professional. I will finish my work." And then she did something Zainab did not expect. She apologized for her pain, as if grief were an inconvenience she had no right to feel while in the presence of her employer. Zainab felt something crack open inside her chest. How old is she? 7. Is she serious? The illness? I don't know, Ma. My mother said the fever is high. But we have no money for the hospital. My salary... Amara's voice broke. It is enough, but not enough for emergencies. Never enough for emergencies. For 7 years, Zainab had paid Amara her wage without once considering what that wage meant in Amara's life. It was a fair market rate. She paid taxes. She considered herself a good employer. But looking at this woman, at the terror in her eyes, the impossible mathematics of poverty, Zainab felt the first real stab of shame she had felt in years. "What is the hospital cost?" Zainab asked quietly. "Ma, I cannot ask." "I am not asking you to ask. I am offering what is the cost." Amara's face crumbled. She tried to speak and could not. Finally, she whispered a number. Perhaps 15,000 naira, perhaps more. The amount a woman like Zainab spent on wine without thinking. "Go," Zainab said. "Go to your daughter. I will arrange the payment. Go now." As Amara left, moving like someone who could not quite believe what was happening, Zainab felt something unfamiliar coursing through her. It was not charity. It was recognition. For the first time, she had seen another person as fully real, as someone whose suffering mattered, whose love for her child was as deep and true as any love Zainab had ever refused to feel. Comment where you're watching from. I want to see how far these stories of hope and redemption can travel. Chapter 4. The Return. Amara's daughter was not seriously ill. The fever broke by morning, but when Amara returned to the apartment 3 days later, her entire demeanor had shifted. She moved with a different quality now, not quite confidence, but a kind of lightness, as if a weight had been removed. She found Zainab in her study and stood in the doorway. "Ma, I wanted to thank you. The money you provided, my daughter is well. She is back in school, and she asked about you. She wanted to know who the angel was." Zainab felt heat rise in her chest. "You told her?" "Yes, I told her a kind woman helped us. She wanted to paint a picture for you as thanks." What Amara produced was a child's drawing, crude, beautiful, overwhelming in its innocence. A woman with blue eyes and gold skin standing beside another woman with brown skin. They were holding hands, and around them were drawn small hearts and stars and flowers. Zainab took the drawing with hands that trembled. She had not been drawn with love since she was a child. She had not allowed herself to be drawn with love in decades. "What is your daughter's name?" she asked, though she knew Amara had mentioned it. "Kioma, Ma. It means good God." But I named her that because I still believe, that kindness exists in this world, that goodness is real. Zainab looked at the drawing, at those small hearts floating in the sky, at the two figures holding hands, unequal in size but equal in dignity. "Tell me about her," Zainab said. "Tell me about Kioma." And for the first time in 7 years, Amara sat down in Zainab's presence, not as a servant performing duties, but as a person sharing her interior world. She spoke of Kioma's first words, her favorite foods, her dream of becoming a teacher. She spoke as a mother speaks, with a love so profound it seemed to fill the entire room. Zainab listened, and as she listened, she felt walls beginning to crack, not metaphorically, but actually, physically, as if something deep in her chest was fracturing and she had no power to stop it. Chapter 5. The Hidden Life. After that day, something shifted between them. It was not friendship, the hierarchy remained. But it was something else. Recognition, perhaps, mutual witnessing. Zainab began asking questions about Kioma's school, her progress, her hopes. She began leaving money on the kitchen counter for household expenses, amounts that were clearly meant for Amara's daughter. She began waiting for Amara to arrive each morning, and she realized she was waiting, truly waiting, not just marking time. But it was during a conversation on a rainy evening that Zainab asked the question that would change everything. "Amara, where is Kioma's father?" The question hung in the air. Amara's hand paused in the act of arranging flowers. When she spoke, her voice was very quiet. "He is gone, Ma." "Dead?" "In a way." Amara set down the flowers. "He never knew she existed. I did not tell him. I could not tell him." There was something in the way she said this, a pain so layered, so old, that Zainab understood there was a story being carefully, deliberately not told. She did not push, not yet, but that night she found herself researching trafficking statistics in Lagos, missing women, human trafficking networks, girls taken from streets and villages, sold into servitude, exploited, broken. And then she understood. The next morning when Amara arrived, Zainab was waiting. "I need you to tell me," she said gently. "Not as my employee, as one human being to another. Tell me what happened." Amara's face went white, but after a long moment she began to speak. She had been 19, working in a restaurant. A man had approached her with promises: good work, good money, a chance to send money home to her family. He had seemed kind. She had been naive, or perhaps simply desperate. Within weeks, she was in a building with no windows, with other girls, with men who used her body and called it business. She became pregnant. She did not know who the father was. The men who held her did not care. She was no longer profitable. They threw her out into the streets when she was 7 months along, and she gave birth to Kioma in a clinic run by an organization that saved girls like her. It had taken her 5 years to escape the shadow of that place, 5 years to believe she deserved to live, 5 years to stop flinching when someone touched her shoulder. Then she had come to work for Zainab. "I did not tell you," Amara said quietly, "because I did not want you to see me as damaged. I wanted to be useful, clean, worthy of the wage you paid me. I wanted Kioma to have a mother who was not broken." Zainab listened to every word, and as she listened, she felt her entire worldview restructuring itself around this truth. She had been served by a goddess disguised as a maid. Amara's strength was not the strength of the privileged. It was the strength of someone who had survived hell and chosen to love anyway. Chapter 6. The Mirror. That night, Zainab sat alone in her fortress and understood finally what her fear had been protecting her from. She had refused love not because she was too proud, but because she was too afraid that if she let anyone in, they would discover she was not worth the love she received, afraid that she would fail them, disappoint them, reveal herself as hollow. But looking at Amara, looking at a woman who had survived genuine horror and still arranged flowers with tenderness, still showed up each day, still believed in kindness, Zainab realized that her fear was a luxury. Her pain, whatever it was, paled in comparison to what Amara had endured, and yet Amara had not hardened. Amara had not built a fortress. Amara had survived the worst things and chosen vulnerability anyway. Chukwu's photograph of the white stone house with the terraced gardens returned to her mind. She thought of the laughter that could echo through those spaces. She thought of what it might feel like to open a door and let someone in. The next morning she called him. "Chukwu," she said, "I've been afraid. I've built a wall so high that I could not let anyone in because I believed I was not worth the risk of loving. But I know now that I was wrong. I'm afraid still. But I'm beginning to understand that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to love despite it." "Zainab?" His voice carried hope and confusion in equal measure. "Are you saying—" "I am saying yes. To the house. To the garden. To you. To trying. I do not know if I will be good at love, but I want to learn." And as she said it, she realized that Amara was standing in the kitchen doorway, tears streaming down her face, smiling as if she had just witnessed a miracle. If this story already touched your heart, hit the like button. It helps Amara's message reach more people who still believe in kindness. Chapter 7. The circle closes. The wedding took place 6 months later, not in a grand hotel as Zainab's father had suggested, but in a garden designed by Chukwu and cultivated by the hands of many. Amara came early to help Zainab dress, and as she arranged Zainab's hair, added flowers to her veil, she said something that Zainab had not expected. "Your mother would be proud of you." Zainab went very still. "You knew about my mother?" "I read many things while cleaning," Amara said softly. "I'm sorry, but yes. I saw photographs. I read a journal entry once. I read that she died when you were 12, and that you promised yourself you would never love anyone because love meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant loss." Zainab turned to face her. "How did you know that would help? How did you know that you needed to show me that love is not weakness?" "Because," Amara said. I had to learn the same thing. I had to learn that surviving does not mean hiding, that being broken does not mean being unlovable. I learned it by watching you serve someone who had dismissed me. I learned it by seeing you care about my daughter when you barely knew me. I learned that if you, with all your walls, could love, then perhaps I could too. And there, in that moment, Zainab understood the full circle of it. She had given Amara money for her daughter's illness, but Amara had given Zainab something far more precious: permission to be human, permission to break, permission to love. Chapter 8. The Revelation. At the reception, after the vows had been spoken and the music had filled the garden, Zainab made an announcement. Her voice was clear, her words carefully chosen. "Today I married Chukwu," she said, "but I want to mark another commitment. Amara, will you come here?" Confused, Amara approached. The entire garden fell silent. "I am establishing a foundation," Zainab continued, "in partnership with the organization that helped you escape. We will provide housing, medical care, legal support, and job training for women who have survived trafficking. And Amara, I would like you to direct it, to use your experience, your strength, your wisdom to help others find their way back to themselves." Amara's hands went to her mouth. She made a sound, like a caught breath, like a prayer, like the sound of a woman who had never imagined herself as anything but a servant, hearing herself called a leader. "I cannot," Amara whispered. "You can," Zainab said quietly. "You already have. Every day you choose to show up, to care, to believe in goodness despite everything. That is leadership. That is vision. I'm simply giving you a platform." And as Amara wept, as the guests wept, as Kioma, now 8 years old and wearing a flower crown she had designed herself, ran into her mother's arms, Zainab understood that this too was love. This too was what happened when you opened your heart. Not romance but transformation, not safety but purpose, not the absence of pain, but the choice to move through it towards something meaningful. Chapter 9. The Threshold. 1 year later, Zainab and Chukwu moved into the white stone house with the terraced gardens. The rooms that had been designed for laughter now filled with it, not always, not without struggle, but genuinely, authentically. Kioma came to stay on weekends, and she had her own room. She was a careful child, inclined towards silence, but slowly she was learning that she could be loud here, that she could take up space, that her existence was not a burden, but a joy. Amara came too, though she lived in a modest apartment not far away. She was building her foundation. She was learning to speak to rooms of people instead of moving silently through them. She was discovering that being seen, truly, fully seen, did not destroy her, it healed her. One evening, as Zainab stood on the terrace of the white stone house, watching the Lagos skyline blur into darkness, Amara joined her. They stood in comfortable silence. "I used to think," Zainab said, "that love was weakness, that opening yourself to someone meant giving them power to destroy you." "And now?" Amara asked. "Now I think love is the only power that matters. Not the power to destroy, but the power to transform, the power to see someone and say, 'I see you, and you are worth the risk.'" Below them, the city moved on, millions of people carrying their invisible wounds, their hidden strengths, their desperate hopes, and in this white stone house, in this garden that had taken a year to cultivate, 2 women who had seemed destined for solitude had discovered something unexpected: connection, witness, redemption, home. Epilogue. One act of kindness can rewrite a destiny, not because it erases the past, but because it speaks a truth the past tried to bury. You were always worthy of love. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, courage, and second chances. Thank you for watching. African billionaire's daughter refused love until she discovered her maid's dark secret. And remember, one act of kindness can rewrite a destiny.